some of the PYQs that we will be taking in 3 sessions. So, today we will be taking those PYQs that pertain to economic growth, development and resource mobilization. Apart from that, we will also talk about inclusive growth. Okay. So, the idea is we will be seeing some of those questions which were asked in previous years, and we will see as to how those questions could have been approached, because what happens that in economy things only get updated, the core content remains the same. You need to know have that core content, else rest all things you need to add on the value. So, that is all about the value enrichment part. Okay. So, there would be series of questions, although there are many PYQs that have been asked. So, we have chosen all those important whatsoever fields that these are relevant from the point of the current context. See, the PYQs are dating as back as say 2015, but we need to also know about the relevance of those PYQs as to how these could help in upcoming examinations, whether these topics are even relevant in today's context or not, or if there is any development that has happened over the period of time, we need to know these things. So, that is why we will be dealing certain questions. So, one by one the questions would appear and we will discuss the concepts as well as what could have been the best possible solution to this. So, what are the causes of persistent high food inflation in India, and comment on the effectiveness of the monetary policy of the RBI to control this type of inflation. And this question would have appeared in the previous year mains 2024. So, first the introduction part could have been, if we talk about the introduction part, you could have written either what is inflation. So, you could have added the what is the meaning of inflation, basically general price rise over a period of time. And you could have added persistent food inflation. So, you could have added persistent food inflation. So, you could have added that in the year 2022 and 2023, back to back El Nino years, lower supplies. So, it was lower supplies and as well as global supply constraints of food grains. Why? You could have added one dimension. So, Russia-Ukraine war. So, first was global supplies, El Nino years, then you could have added post pandemic supply chain disruption. Then you could have added other thing, the other aspect of this answer could have been about poor cold storage facilities, that means high perishability of horticultural crops. High perishability of horticultural crops. So, this could have been your other dimension. Okay. Then commenting on RBI policy tools. So, RBI policy tools mainly targets demand pull inflation. So, you could have added that limited, it is limited for RBI, limited policy option for RBI to tackle food inflation. So, there was limited policy option for RBI does not have those policy tools to actually target the tackle the food inflation. So, this is one of the other aspect of food inflation, limitations from RBI to tackle it, and that is why RBI has more often than not has actually advocated that even in the CPI based inflation targeting framework that we have, that we target, the RBI targets or the monetary policy committee targets core consumer price index, the movement in CPI. The core idea is that they have told that even within that they should target core inflation, targeting the core inflation rather than the headline inflation, because there is high volatility in food prices as well as fuel, which is beyond the scope of control by RBI. RBI does not have all those tools with which they can control these movements. So, this is one of the other thing that you could have added in your answer to make it look more you can say complete. And at the end, in the concluding part, you could have told that that the government of India is coming out with many schemes. You could have come out with particular scheme like the government of India is the world's largest grain storage plan, decentralized grain storage plan, wherein they want to ensure that the grain storage facility is higher. Then they are actually incentivizing farmers to even increase production by introducing even better climate resilient high yield varieties of food grains as well as horticulture varieties. So, you could have added these things to make your answer look even more comprehensive and complete. Now, coming to the second question. So, discuss the merits and demerits of 4 labor codes in the context of labor market reforms, and what has been the progress so far in this regard. So, again this question turned up in mains 2024. So, first you could have introduced the 4 labor codes, that is code on wages, social security, industrial relations code, code on occupants' health, safety and working condition. So, this is the other code. You could have introduced that these codes have been introduced, and the government has started the deliberation with different states. Many states have been onboarded to create common rules, so that the complexities of 29 central laws have been codified. Now, merits. If we talk about the merits, first uniform definition. So, it removes ambiguity. It removes the ambiguity associated with the definitions, that earlier different laws had different definition about wages, different definition about whatsoever provisions are the penal provisions, but under these codes the definitions have been made uniform, so that whenever it comes to any dispute resolution, the definition part as to what constitute the wages, what about the compensation that would be awarded. So, everything is more streamlined under these 4 labor codes. Okay. Then we talk about code on social security. talks about gig worker for the first time. So, it has for the first time defined the what constitute that gig economy part, then also talked about unorganized worker, worker social security code, board, sorry, on the lines of EPFO there should be a board which should extend the social security benefits of provident fund pensions as well as life insurance to unorganized workforce also. Then you could have talked about reforms in working hours for women. So, women can be employed beyond 7 p.m. So, there are modalities that have been defined, and the other merit is it is more pro business to incentivize entrepreneurship So, you could have added these dimensions. Then on the demerit part, easy layoff policy. So, layoff has been made easier without notifying the government. So, it has become more difficult to enforce strike. So, earlier only 30 days notice was mandatory. Now, under these provisions, notice of more than 60 days, at least 60 days are minimum. Then it lacks enforcement mechanism. So, these are more policy prescription rather than execution part is missing. So, execution is more important in India. It has been found out that despite these laws, it is hardly getting benefited, and it is more about complexities in maintaining those books and data entries rather than having tangible benefits to workers as well or the employers. So, as far as status, code on wages, they are in final, you can say, stages of agreement. However, there are different states which have not been onboarded. Many states have not been onboarded because this labor is a concurrent list subject. So, some of the provisions are also applied by the state governments. So, that is why all the states have to come on board, they need to come out with a common rules. Then that is why it is missing, the rules under these labor codes are still missing, and that is why many of the businesses are more apprehensive about the restrictive labor laws, which are more stringent on the employer rather than employees. So, this is how the status you could have come out with the concluding part. So, this is how you could have attempted this particular question. Okay. So, if I say that labor laws, why is it very important? Because India has been more, it has, you can say, it needs more jobs. Recently, the chief economic advisor CEA had said that India would be needing 8 crore jobs annually till 2035. Sorry, 8 crore jobs total. 80 lakhs job annually till 2035. So, from 2025 to 2035, 80 lakhs jobs should be created every year, amounting to 8 crores job. But obviously, we know that at the same time there is a huge demand for automation, artificial intelligence and industry 4.0, and these have certain limitations. What is the limitation? That they tend to replace human workforce, and it has been found out that there is a particular term that has been in news, that is job polarization. So, you could have added some of these dimensions, job polarization, you could add these things, job polarization, where mid skilled job, middle level jobs are actually getting knocked off. AI is replacing those jobs, the lower level jobs, the more labor intensive job, as well as the highly knowledge driven jobs, the high skill jobs, they are not getting replaced, but the middle jobs, the clerical level jobs, the repetitive and iterative jobs, that are getting replaced by artificial intelligence. With robotics also in pipeline, in say 10-15 years, it has been found, it has been actually tagged that with robots coming into picture, even the low skill jobs would be getting replaced. And recently there was one information that came out that even the Meta, Mark Zuckerberg, the chief of Meta company, the Facebook, he has said that in the next 5 years, the AI and robotic based AI would be able to replace even the best of the surgeons. So, in that case, many of the jobs which technically feels to be irreplaceable may also get replaced, and there would be far fewer jobs, because the thing would become more AI driven and capital intensive. So, that is one of the risks for India. If they try to rapidly adopt to some of these things, then there would be lesser job, and in a way the demand would go down, because today what we India needs is huge job. If the jobs are there, there would be more demand, and if there is more demand, people would be actually coming out with more consumption in the economy, and more economic growth would happen. But if the jobs are not there, then there would be more people who would be requiring those goods, but they cannot afford it. In a way, the economy would go in a persistent slowdown. Okay, so this is the idea behind the second question. Coming to the third question. So, what is the status of digitalization in the Indian economy? So, first digitalization, you talk about define digital, you could have defined digitalization. So, basically it is the process of rapid adoption of service delivery through digital means, which leads to improved accessibility and wider reach. So, what kind of service delivery? So, what kind of service delivery? Banking system, payments, then citizen centric services, application forms, license, certificates, taxes, etc. Then you could have talked about education, basically MOOC, massive online open classes, health, telemedicine and teleconsultation. So, these are the service deliveries which are being talked about in digitalization. So, there are different ways you could have approached. So, status, UPI, more than billion payments. Then you could have an internet base, $115 crore wireless and roughly 90 crore broadband. You could have talked about PM Jan Dhan Yojana, 55 crore bank accounts, as well as internet banking facilities. Then you could have talked about the Swayam portal for education, and at last you will have to talk about the digital public infrastructure, like Ayushman Bharat digital mission, then Agri Stack, then you talk about APAR for education. So, this is how you could have added some of these dimensions. Ayushman Bharat digital mission, that is the health stack, which is the ABDM card, which is Abha, Ayushman Bharat health account, Abha card, APAR for education, the DPI which has been created for education, then health stack, then Agri Stack, the Agri Stack which has been created under the digital agriculture mission. In the same manner, we could have come out with the data, the recent data, how these are being scaled up. India has also talked about the DPI, as India has been showing the model architecture of the cost effective digital public infrastructure, which could be emulated by many other countries, and they are actually talking about these things, the UPI system, and the of late India has also talked about unified lending interface, ULI. So, the new trinity is JAM, Jandhar, Aadhaar Mobile, UPI, unified payment, universal payment interface, and the unified lending interface. So, ULI and UPI, you could have talked about these things, and this is how you can actually add up to the answer writing as to how these contents can be added in a more systematic manner. So, you need to know these things, that okay, I need to put these things in my perspective in the answer writing, so as to make sure that my answer looks good. Okay. So, digitalization ensures that accessibility and affordability is ensured. Then you could have come out with recent information that there is digital payment index which are brought out by RBI, then financial inclusion index is one other thing. So, how fintechs, you could have added fintech, the financial technology companies like PhonePe or payment service operators, all those PhonePe, Google Pay, how they are now becoming super apps. They are ensuring many customized payment solutions, many customized financial products like micro insurance, those EMI based insurance facilities, those on the finger, everything, recharges, bills, payments, everything is there on the finger. So, this is how India is now integrating technically, everything is now is being seamlessly getting integrated. One more dimension you could have you could add is the investment climate. Now, the retail participation in stock market is increasing, all because of digitalization. Why? Because all those stock market trading now happens with one fingertip, with the coming up of Grow, Zerodha, these apps. They have popularized the concept of retail investing. Now, people are more inclined towards investing in equity market directly. Even RBI has come out with direct government securities investment for retail investors, the retail direct scheme. So, multiple perspective, health, education, payments, banking, agriculture, citizen centric service deliveries, everything you need to come into your answer should look like that. It should be mix of all these dimensions, and then you could have presented and you could have concluded about what are the various problems faced in this regard. So, the other challenges, if we talk about the problem faced in this regard. So, the problem faced, if you talk about the problems, first, asymmetric infrastructure, digital infrastructure. There is a clear cut rural urban divide, rural urban digital divide. This is one other feature, there is a clear cut digital divide between rural and urban areas. Then you could have added other thing, that is lack of digital literacy. People have come to know how to flick YouTube content or how to scroll those Instagram reels and Facebook content, but they do not know even how to fill a digital form, digital application form. So, digitalization or digital literacy does not mean that you are able to to access YouTube, WhatsApp and Instagram, all those social media sites. These are just these are plain and simple, these are consumptive in nature. It is all about how you are more able to access those citizen centric delivery, how you are able to generate those licenses, pay for the taxation, or you can use those online tools for education, how you can use telemedicine apps, those e-Sanjeevani, there is one e-Sanjeevani app by the government of India to promote telemedicine. Then digital agri stack, how you are able to create those repository, you also create those unique account for yourself. These are all digital literacy. Okay. Knowing and scrolling internet is not digital literacy. Then there is cyber security risk. There is cyber security risk, which is also one of the core problems, and electricity, back-end infrastructure. Electricity, which is an issue. Electricity is not 24/7 reliable in many of the tier 3, tier 4 cities as well as the rural areas. So, this is how, and there is always a resistance to adoption of digital means, because intangible, any information is more so not liked by people who are old school. In that sense, you could have added these things in your answer. Cyber security risk, you could have talked about digital arrest, the cyber frauds, phishing mails and all these things which have become more so streamlined. So, this is how you could have summed up your answer to make it more informative. So, that was the idea behind this particular question. Okay. Now, coming to the unemployment parts. First, you could have defined what is unemployment. So, basically people in working age bracket, they are seeking to work, they are seeking for remunerative work, not any kind of a remunerative work, but unable to find meaningful work. Then you talk about structural unemployment in India, how is it an issue? So, structural unemployment. So, you could have come out what is unemployment. People are seeking to work, people want to work, they are within that working age population. Working age population is between 15 to 59 years of age for India. India calculates this, worldwide it is 15 to 64 years, both the limits inclusive, 15 as well as 59. So, you could have added these things, but how you could have defined what is structural unemployment. First, you could have said that what is structural unemployment? Job and skill mismatch, that jobs are available, but the skill sets of the people are not in sync with what is the demand of the market. So, that is how most of the jobs in India is structural in nature, but reasons you could have added. Why is it a reason? The reasons are upgradation of technology, poor industry academia, linkages which leads to more of churning out of engineers which are unemployable. So, this was highlighted in State of Working India report in 2024. So, there was one report, it said that more than 40% of India's graduates from technical education, technically those degrees which are more considered to be professional degrees, they are highly unemployable, because what they have learnt in those 3 or 4 years of their higher education is completely out of sync of what the industry wants. So, there is academia industry asymmetry, there is no linkages. So, lack of coordination. Then third, poor foundational education. So, what happens that our foundational literacy and numeracy, that is lacking, we have, that has been more often than not. There is one specific survey, annual survey of education report ASER, which is brought out by Pratham. They try to survey all those people, all those students within the school going age, and they come out with the data that even students of class 7th and 8th are not even able to read texts of class as low as class 3. They cannot able to, they are not able to do multiplication in basic mathematics, they are poor at these things. So, that shows that even though we have ensured gross enrollment ratio reaching 100% in school education, but still the quality of education is not up to the mark, and if foundational education is poor, it is most likely to dent the skill upgradation in coming years. Okay. So, then you could have also added poor perception of vocational training. So, it is said that if a person gets enrolled in diploma and ITIs, it is looked upon as if the person belongs from a low socio-economic status, or the person was, or the student was poor in academics. Then there is one more thing, increasing capital intensive nature of Indian industry. So, Indian industry is rapidly adopting modern equipments, modern technology. So, what is that happening? What is that doing? First, on the skill front, they are demanding a skill upgradation, and other, they are actually replacing mankind. They are replacing the human work, they are replacing labor forces, and this is happening even in infrastructure. We have seen that the roads are being built using big huge machines. They are able to lay all those concretes, pour and mix concrete, and even make it out in a more structured manner, and that replaces many labor manpower which are engaged in construction activities. Then the methodology for computation. So, you could have talked about the PLFS survey. It gives information in about 3 things: the worker population ratio, then it talks about labor force participation rate and unemployment rate, and they also take account, the methodologies are usual status, that is principal plus subsidiary. Usual status, that they define within the preceding 1 year what has been the principal work and what has been the subsidiary work, even if the person was working in the preceding 1 year. Even if the person was working for more than 7 months, he is considered to be working in that principal status, and if even in those 5 months, if the person was working for some other occupation, then that becomes his subsidiary status. Then second, you could have also talked about the current weekly status, that the current weekly status which is brought out, wherein from the date of survey, in the preceding 7 days, whether the person was even engaged for even 1 day of the preceding 7 survey days or not. So, that is how the current weekly status based unemployment rate is defined. So, there is an if we talk about the examining part. So, under the usual status, the unemployment rate is lower because that takes wider you can say the range of dates are wider, because it takes into account 1 year, preceding 1 year from the date of survey. So, obviously, in the preceding 1 year, the person could have been employed in many other occupations, even though he may not have been consistently getting those employment, but he was employed. So, it reduces those people who are not employed. So, it reduces the unemployment rate. But if you go into the current weekly status, obviously the unemployment rate goes up. Why? Because even in those 7 weeks under assessment, a person who could have been working for rest of the years may not be working in those 7 days of the survey period. So, that is why it has a higher unemployment rate. Second, it does not take into account the levels of underemployment. What happens that underemployment levels, whether the quality of employment is in sync with the skill sets being possessed by the person, it is silent on this thing. Then the other thing is the other aspect is you could have also added the how about open unemployment. People have deliberately moved out of labor force. So, criticism issues different unemployment rate under different methodology and issues of underemployment and open unemployment. Underemployment and open unemployment. So, you could have added these things in your answer to make it look more comprehensive. Okay. Economic growth in the recent past has been led by increase in labor productivity. So, you could have started in the intro part, since 2020 India's growth rate has been averaging 7.5% annually, and you could have linked with the body part. In the body part, you could have talked about improved productivities. So, what are the factors of improved productivity as to how India has been able to achieve higher growth rate? First, improved skill sets. So, you could have talked about due to different schemes like Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana and Skill India Mission, then Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gramin Kaushal Yojana, then PM Employment Generation Program. They have been focused on skill based entrepreneurship, skill based certification. Then you could have talked about rapid adoption of technologies, modern technology. So, you could have talked about, you can add that India has been the front runner in adopting those technology which aids improvement in output. So, that is why in many companies are shifting their bases to India, because India is now becoming favorable. Then say third is reduced government red tapeism. So, the government has reduced delays, ease of doing business. So, the government has adopted single window clearances for many of the companies to shift to India. To add to that, India is also projecting huge demand for the goods which it produces. All in all, it is projecting itself as labor friendly and an investment friendly destination, and attracting many companies to set up their bases in India. Then focus on knowledge economy. India has been adopting a stance that India is now focusing on higher order knowledge, integrating deeply into those deep technology or emerging technologies like AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, industry 4.0, data science. Many of these things, even in biotechnology, the newer streams have been explored, not just at the higher education levels till the foundational levels also they have been introduced. So, you could have added these things, and then friendly and facilitatory role. So, the government has moved out of many of the businesses, and now they have assumed the role of a facilitator. They want to not they want India not to be projected as a restrictive economy, rather it has introduced labor flexibility for companies, and it has also prompted many of the labor to improve their outputs. What is output? Per labor cost, per unit cost in terms of the labor cost is reduced because of all these things. And the second thing is suggest the growth pattern that will lead to creation of more jobs. So, create growth pattern for more jobs. First, focus on labor intensive industry. Then MSME push. Third, industry academia collaboration. Fourth, slow but you can write pragmatic adoption of automation and open economy. So, you could have added these things. First is focus on low labor intensive industries like textile, like chemical industry, like leather and footwear industry. So, the government knows that these industries are hardly they are, and also food processing industry, they can add these because most of the works are more labor oriented in nature. Then focus on MSME. MSME employs more than 12 crore people, and there should be improvement in informal economy. So, India should not completely shun the informal economy. Formal economy, India should push transition from informal employment to formal sources of employment, but that push should not be complete collapse of informal sector, because informal sectors are better at job creation, and that too they are more flexible when it comes to creating quick jobs. Then industry academia collaboration, focus should be on apprenticeship, focus should be on vocational training right from foundational years, that industry should be connecting with those people, those children and those higher educational college going students, so that they come to know okay, what are the demands of the industry. If the industry is demanding say other skill sets which are more updated, still people are learning obsolete technology, like in mechanical engineering people are still going for those lathe machine works and all these things, knowing this fact that it is being done completely on CNC, and of late the 3D printers have come in. But what is the purpose of doing those folding and sheet molding and welding and all these things operation? These are just waste of time and waste of human labor. They could have added more about CNC technology, how these things are more informative. Then there should be pragmatic adoption of automation. See, everything is getting automated. There is artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence which is being talked about, automated robots, robotic based manufacturing which are making rounds in many of the developed economies like South Korea, Japan, even in China. However, India should be more pragmatic about adoption, because that would lead to mass job losses, and India needs job at the current mix of things. India cannot replace those things with automation. And third, last is open economy. India should follow the policy of open economy. They should throw in the domestic industry for competition, because if there is more foreign investors and foreign products which come to India, that actually challenges domestic product to upgrade their quality and performances, and in that way that would ensure more job creation. Apart from that, they should also invest, they should also attract foreign investments, because they come with technology as well as the demand becomes from local, the product goes global, and that creates many jobs. For example, Apple. Because Apple came to India, there has been revolution in display and mobile manufacturing ecosystem in India. So, this is how you could have summed up the ideas. You could have added how the government is coming out with various schemes like Mudra Yojana, focusing on non-farm employment through entrepreneurship. Then you can have talked about the Prime Minister's apprenticeship scheme, where a Prime Minister internship program, where internships are being provided by top 500 companies as far as the Fortune 500 companies are there using the CSR fund. Then the government has also talked about the PM-KV Kaushal Vikas Yojana version 4.0, talking about imparting the deep tech skills which are required. Then national manufacturing mission, which has been announced in the recent budget. You can add these things for improving the job prospects, and also focus on infrastructure development. One more thing, infra development, because during infrastructure development it creates many jobs, and also focus on renewables. Green jobs are the new buzz, that it has the potential to create many more jobs. Okay. So, this is how you could have added your content. Now, coming, do you agree that Indian economy has recently experienced V-shaped recovery? So, this question pertains from 2021 and it pertains to the COVID time. So, V-shaped recovery. V-shaped recovery is something like this. So, basically it has touched the trend line and it has exceeded. This is the trend line and it has exceeded. So, this is the V-shaped recovery, economic growth. This is the growth rate, economic growth rate. And this is years. So, this was in 2020, this is in 2021, this was in 2019. So, this is how things have come out. So, India has experienced V-shaped recovery. Yes, India's, so you could have added that what is V-shaped recovery? When the economic growth goes down and again picks up within few quarters, within 1 year itself, that is V-shaped recovery, rapid move, and again traces the trend line, again traces the pre-pandemic trend line of growth, it is tracing back to that particular levels. So, this is how you could have come up with your answers. Then, do you agree that Indian economy has recently experienced, okay, V-shaped recovery covered. Then you could have talked about how India has experienced this. Because in 2020, 2021 it was minus 8% growth rate. However, in 2021-22 it zoomed to 9.29%, around about 9%. So, it moved down, it quickly picked up. So, this is how India has experienced V-shaped recovery. The factors was first demand upsurge post pandemic. Rapid infra push. So, the government push for infrastructure, the capex increased from 2.5 or 3 lakh crores to 9.5 to 10 lakh crores, so 3 to 4 times increase in the last 3-4 years. So, this is how the economy was saved. It was all the government expenditure which got pushed. Then India also came with COVID relief package for MSMEs and individuals. Individuals were also given certain packages under Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, free food grain, it is still continuing. Then rapid adoption of online ecosystem. So, it happened that many things went online and India was able to adopt to these changes quickly. So, that is how India experienced this V-shaped recovery, and that was a good thing for India to experience, as currently now we have even exceeded the normal trend line of growth, and we have recovered to those pre-pandemic levels of growth and even exceeded in some of those sectors. Our economy is booming in terms of the aviation market that has reached the pre-pandemic levels. Even in terms of the automobile sector, more than 50 lakh cars have been sold, automobiles have been sold in the last 1 year, and that shows that there is a demand push, there is a resurgent demand. Then the jobs which are getting created are more tech based, and they are more in sync with what is the demand of the nature of the economy. Define potential GDP and explain its determinants. So, potential GDP maximum output that can be generated with efficient deployment of current resources. So, this is the potential. Actual GDP is actual realized value, and what is the potential GDP? From the current mix of things, what is the potential level of growth that we can achieve? For example, India has a potential GDP growth rate of 8 to 8.5%, and currently we are clocking around 6.5 to 7% growth rate. So, India has, and with the current mix of things which India has currently, India has a room for increasing 1% growth rate year on year. So, that is how this is our potential GDP and actual GDP. So, the determinants are, if you talk about the determinants, human capital, what is the level of human capital, domestic demand, this is another thing, what is the potential GDP, then manufacturing base or industrial base is another thing. Government policies, whether the government wants to push growth or not, and last is inclusivity and wealth distribution, and purchasing power of masses. So, whether it is more so defined or not. So, first is human capital, whether the human resources which India possesses in terms of favorable demography of having more than 50% population of age below 28 years, and they have hit a sweet spot in terms of demographic dividend, which would last for the next 30 years till 2055. Then we can also talk about one more thing, that how India is pushing the skilling of India's workforce. Then comes the domestic demand. India would be entering a phase of discretionary spending if India's economy goes up to 7 to 8 trillion USD. From 7 to 8 trillion USD, it has been experienced that doubling happens rapidly. From 7 to 14-15 trillion USD, this happens rapidly, and India needs to focus on the domestic demand. Then manufacturing base, because there should be an active push in shift from agriculture towards industries. So, the government of India should be focusing on more industrial outputs. Government policies pushing more jobs, making more facilitatory policies for industries to set up their bases, and inclusivity and purchasing power. The idea should be, it should be broad based consumption. People from all strata, right at the bottom, should be able to create demand in the economy, and that is how economy of scale are reached. These are the certain determinants. And what are the inhibiting factors? If you talk about the inhibiting factors, first income inequality, 10% of the population hold more than 77% of the total income, then under and poor skilling, skill sets are not in sync, focus on intermediate goods production, and because of this industrial base we are producing way more goods, but they are getting ended up as a part of consumption, not as a finished goods. So, this is another issue. Then if you talk about the government policies and actions are divergent. They are divergent. What the government wants, like for example, PLI scheme. So, the government came out with capital link subsidy scheme for improving manufacturing base, but it has been found out that the capital grants, the payments of capital grants have been slower, and many companies have not even started, even though getting selected under the PLI scheme. And then other thing is informal economy. So, this is another issue, that we are still highly informal economy, highly informal in terms of the total output, and that is how it is limiting our total growth, because they create cheap goods which are more cost effective. On the consumption front they are more affordable, but in terms of overall value addition, that is poor. Okay, so these are the certain things. Now, if you talk about the other aspect, that is, do you agree with the view that steady GDP growth and low inflation have left the Indian economy in good shape? Give arguments. So, you can talk that India has entered a phase of Goldilocks period of economic growth. Which ensures moderately stable inflation, but relatively higher economic growth. You can talk about that India's inflation. India has been able to carefully manage the inflation within the 4-5% whatsoever is the target of the Reserve Bank of India. The growth rate are averaging around 6.5 to 7%, and it is expected that it would pick up in years to come. And how India's economy is in good shape? You need to support your answers, because job creation at all time high level, unemployment rate at 3.2%, more than 24 crore people moved out of poverty. They have been moved out of poverty. Then other shape is consumption boost in terms of automobile sale, demand in aviation sector, so these are the how Indian economy is in the best of the shape, but there are certain challenges. Then the quality of jobs are questionable. So, these are being questioned again. Second is huge divide between urban and rural consumption. So, this is another issue. Apart from that, there is digital divide, which restricts information flow. Then there is again feminization of workforce in Indian agriculture is another limiting issues, where men are moving towards urban areas in terms of casual work and females are actually moving to farms. Similarly, our manufacturing base are stagnant manufacturing output. At 15 to 17% of GDP. This has stagnated in percentage terms for the last 30 years since 1991. Although we have improved in the absolute terms, but the percentage terms, it has more so driven by the service sector growth, and that has not created many more jobs. So, you could have added these things in your answer. Now comes the second last. Among several factors for India's potential growth, savings rate is the most effective one. Do you agree? What are the other factors available for growth potential? So, savings rate is an important indicator of overall investment rates in the economy. So, you write about investment, importance of saving rate, more fuel for investment, capital formation in the economy, then less reliance on foreign capital, improved infrastructure, less external debt for the government, and crowding in for private investment push. So, these are some of the factors that the crowd it pushes. So, what happens that capital formation happens at C plus I plus G plus X minus C plus I plus G plus X minus M, where C is consumption expenditure, I is investment. This has to be used. So, the idea is it has to be coming from the savings rate. If more is the saving, more would be the investment rate. But what if there is higher investment and lower saving rates? Then we need to access fund from foreign capital. We are reliant on foreign capital. So, if the domestic savings rate are higher, then that pushes more investment through domestic funding. Then there is improved infrastructure, because if the higher saving rates needs to be channelized into physical infrastructure development, because that adds to economic growth. Not just during the construction part, even post construction many of the industrial activities can be shifted, many urbanized economy would come up along the infrastructure. Then less external debt for the government. Obviously, if the government is able to source all its deficit and all its part from domestic economy, that would mean that they are less reliant on external debt, and with more liquidity in the system because of higher savings rate, private investment picks up. The cost of capital goes down, and that prompts many private investors, okay, the economy is running good. However, if there is if there is excessively high savings rate, then the consumption goes down. What is consumption? It is the portion of total income. If you divide total income, it is of two type. It can be divided into two type. One is used for consumption, one is used for savings. So, if the savings rate are too high, then obviously you are slowing down the consumption, that is not good for the economy. However, a moderate level of savings rate, say 30 to 35% is very good for the economy, because that pushes the total investment rate in the economy. So, other factors for growth potential: first, domestic consumption level, because if C is very high, then only that would prompt factories to actually increase their capacities. Then there is cost effective manufacturing. This is another indicator for growth potential, that if the economy is more able to produce goods and services which are more cost effective, then many of the factories and companies would shift their bases to the country which is more effective in production of these goods and services. Then comes the income distribution levels. How distributed the income is, because then the consumption becomes more broad based rather than more narrow. So, this is how, this is very important, one of the growth potentials, and favorable government policies. So, the government policies should be there to push economic growth. Although there could be certain overheating in the economy in terms of higher inflation, there should be active synergy, active coordinated efforts which should come from the government as well as the monetary policy regulator, that is the Reserve Bank of India. So, these are the things that you could have added in your answer to make it more effective. Okay. Now, the nature of Indian economic growth is described as jobless growth. Do you agree with this view? Give arguments in favor of your answer. So, the question says that you need to favor your answer. So, jobless growth situation where higher economic growth does not translate into more job creation in the economy. So, India's growth is jobless because more output from service sector. Which does not create many jobs. Second, over reliance on agriculture for rural jobs. That means high levels of disguised unemployment. Third, skewed wealth distribution, skewed income distribution, skewed income distribution which curtails broad based consumption. Obviously, you will think that everything is coming repetitive, this income and all, because we are dealing questions from different years, and the questions are similar. In if there are similar concepts getting applied, then you need to have a similar ways of explaining your arguments. Then third, less focus on manufacturing which could create more jobs, and dominance of informal economy. So, informal economy, jobs get created, but they are in low paying, they are underpaid, and they are not regular, they can be removed anytime. So, in that way the unemployment rate goes up, and the other way of jobless growth in India is also poor focus on vocational and skill based training. So, that renders many of those people from higher educational institution as unemployable. So, this is the idea that you could have come up with your content in your answers. So, this is how you could have model your answer. Now, coming for the craze for gold in Indians have led to a surge in import of gold in recent years. Obviously, you talk about India is one of the largest importers of gold. India, one of the largest importers of gold. Gold, second most important import after crude oil. So, pressure on rupee as well as BOP, higher gold import, means more demand for USD, that leads to rupee depreciation, So, it also leads to elevated levels of current account deficit. Okay. So, merits of gold monetization scheme, mobilization of domestically held gold, so all those golds in the household, they can be used, they can be melted, and then it can be again sold as bullions. Second, lower fresh gold import. Second, monetization of gold in market, and also formalization of gold market. So, artificial stock out situation which are created by gold bullion dealers and all these things, they can be restricted, because now fresh gold can be created, that can be supplied in the market, and the prices can be more stable and more formalized. So, these are the features. One of the related concept is sovereign gold bond scheme. It is not gold monetization, rather it tries to reduce the gold input by way of offering gold backed securities. So, the idea is the securities would be issued whose money, whose prices, the face value would be linked with the prices of gold. If the gold prices increases, the face value would increase, and on top of it there would be an interest of 2.5% that would be paid annually. So, it is because the gold prices have increased by more than 100 times in the last 10 years, in the last 7-8 years. So, many people who have bought those sovereign gold bonds, they have exceeded, they are getting returns in excess of more than 13-14% year on year. So, that is why sovereign gold bond has been a hit for the for the bond holders, but the issuer, that is the government, has actually incurred much losses in terms of higher cost of furnishing those debts because of interest, that because the gold prices went up higher. So, this is how you could have modeled the scheme. So, gold related question is very important in this year's mains examination, and this could be asked, this is most likely to be asked in the either in the upcoming 2025 mains or next or the next, because that is making rounds. Now comes examining the pattern and trend of public expenditure on social services. First, you could have defined about social services. Social services: health, education, urban infra, other social sectors. So, what has been the trend? So, it has increased from 2% to 3.5% currently in the last 7-8 years. Similarly, the health expenditure has reached to 2.5%, 2.1% of GDP. Largely it reached to 2.1% in 2022. However, it has again gone back to 1.9%. However, it has improved from 1.5% to 2%. The National Health Policy 2017 talks about improving this ratio to 2% on an average. Then other social expenditure has improved to 5% of GDP. So, overall the total expenditure is hovering at 8 to 9% of GDP. So, this is good from the perspective. However, it is still below what the government spends on defense. So, that is why you need to there needs to be a careful balance in terms of social sector expenditure. To what extent has this been in consonance with achieving the objective of inclusive growth? Achieving objectives of inclusive growth, you talk about health insurance for masses. Because of this, in terms of Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, as well as push to create health infra. In tier 3, tier 4 towns. For example, super speciality hospitals, AIIMS, many more AIIMS have been set up in many other areas. Then the gross enrollment ratios in secondary and primary schooling, secondary and primary have reached 100%. Even in higher education, the government has come out with a target under the national education policy to reach 50% from the current 29% in higher education institute, that is colleges and universities. In terms of urban infrastructure, there is a re-energized push towards construction of sewerage lines, construction of roads and all these things, urban infrastructure, smart towns and cities to improve the quality of life. Apart from that, under the Swachh Bharat mission, segregation of waste are being ensured to improve sanitation facilities, and this is how inclusive growth are being promoted, because the same level of facilities are also being enjoyed by people at the lowest end of economic pyramid. So, this is how you could have actually argued your points from with the data itself. However, you could have also pictured the other part of whether the inclusivity have been ensured. No, the negative part or the limitation part is first wealth and income inequality. Yes, one more thing under this part is extreme poverty has fallen down from extreme poverty levels are down to 2 to 3% of total population currently. It has been agreed by the SBI report also, SBI State Bank of India's report also, even the Niti Aayog multidimensional poverty and household consumption expenditure point out to the similar trends that India's extreme poverty levels are below 5% now, and it is expected that in the next 2-3 years India would be completely eliminating extreme poverty, which is defined on $2.15 per person per day on PPP terms defined by the World Bank. So, this is how you could have modeled your answer, but the limitation part is wealth and income inequality, then high cost of quality education. So, quality education is becoming unaffordable, and healthcare facilities getting limited to only urban areas. Even that in the rural areas still the status of primary healthcare facilities are quite you can say not so much in sync with what the vision lies. So, this is how you could have come out with the answers, and it is more like data driven approach, wherein you could have added more content to make it look more appealing. Then distinguish between care economy and monetized economy. So, you could have talked about care based economy. Care economy basically looks at geriatrics care, geriatrics, emotional support, household based works, care for children. So, the features are no payments, even if payment less remuneration sometimes, no active part of GDP estimation, GDP less represented in economic policy making, monetized economy based on money transaction, actively involved, active part of GDP driven by competition, it leads to, it pushes skill development and upgradation, and creates range of product for consumer. So, care economy, it is household based work, emotional support, geriatrics and pediatrics care, which are not monetized. You are not paying, or even if you are paying a very least amount that is not actively considered a part of GDP, they are not getting adequately remunerated. These are care based economy. Monetized economy, they are actively exchanged at the market prices, the money comes into picture, it is driven by competition, there are various varieties of product. For example, if a person is giving you household work for free, then you cannot ask for the quality, but if the same thing is being offered through say an app, delivery app, you are paying for it, you will demand higher quality, there would be various varieties which are offered. For example, food cooked at home and food what you get at restaurants. In restaurants you have many more options wherein you can choose it. If the food goes wrong, you will not pay it or you will get the replacement, but the same thing is not available. In case of the care based economy which are offered by our mothers and caretakers at home. But the International Labour Organization ILO has talked about that we need to think seriously on care based economy, we need to leverage care economy, because that is a tool for women empowerment, because most of the things like geriatrics care, household based work, emotional support, care for children, these are roles which are played by women without getting any remuneration in exchange. So, that is how we need to promote these care based economy, so as to make sure that the overall GDP estimation has to be higher, and these are one of the limitations of GDP. GDP on the welfare front gets limited because the care economy is not actively and it is not adequately represented in the GDP estimation. So, this is how you could have modeled your answer. That is this is a debate based on the ILO based one of the research paper that was came out that we need to also bring them care economy within the folds of monetized economy, the way US does it. In US everything is monetized, but in most part of Asia it is more like the collectivistic society and societal basis of our upbringing ensures that most of the things we are getting it for free, and that reduces the scope of economic growth in the nation, and also adequate remuneration for the labor which goes into providing the care economy. Most important part of care economy in India is ASHA and A&M workers. The ASHA and A&M worker, Anganwadi workers, they give care economy, they give care support in terms of the primary health care, the first point of contact, vaccination services. The Anganwadi worker gives the preschooling based information and all these things. However, they are paid stipend which are as low as 3,000 or 4,000 per month. If they are getting skilled, if they get skilled, they are more remunerated, then that becomes a monetized economy. Everything gets transacted with money, and that gets actively captured in GDP estimation. So, this is all about today's discussion that we have done regarding the questions.